Hey, I think people are coming in. Let's kick this off. Let's give people a minute to start joining us. And whilst we do, I'll just introduce us. So, everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. This is our first, it's our first webinar of the year, actually, here at Reach Desk. So, very pleased to be joined by some absolute heroes of the game. So, this one is all about maximizing BDR efficiency. Let me share my screen. We've got some slides for you and we can kick us off. Okay, so before we do, I'm joined by two people that I've been following for a while, Emily Parker and Eric Smith. Emily, Eric, nice to see you guys. How are you both?
Yeah.
Doing great.
Good.
Good stuff. So for everyone listening in, watching, please, could you guys introduce yourselves? Emily, can you kick us off, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Emily. I am an SDR leader. I'm based in London. I've been running SDR teams now for around about 5 or so years. I've had 3 SDR teams. Love the idea of scaling up teams that don't necessarily have processes in place yet. And I'm really excited today.
That's one. Thank you. Welcome. And Eric.
Alex.
How are you, man? Nice to see you again.
Doing great, man. And pleasure being here.
Pleasure having you, man. Well, tell us who you are and what you do, and tell us maybe a bit about Above Ground as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Eric Smith. Most of you probably know me from the Lowly SDR podcast. I'm the owner of Above Ground. It's a full service digital marketing agency where we essentially focus on sales and marketing alignment. And we kind of take the stress away from going out and finding a bunch of different vendors to do a bunch of different marketing tasks, almost acting as like a fractional CMO. So yeah, really excited to be here. Huge fan of Reach Desk and direct mail. And I'm a BDR, SDR advocate. So it's a pleasure being here.
Good man, welcome. Well, thanks for joining, guys. Whilst I'm introducing what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to be asking you guys a quick question. What's the biggest roadblock to achieving maximum efficiency for your BDR team? Please put things in the chat, any comments that you want us to address, and please pop in any questions too. Okay, so let me just introduce what we're going to be focusing on today. If you've got a BDR or SDR team, however you label it, BDRs, SDRs, doesn't matter to me. You're probably on the right track to building a strong revenue engine for your organization. The question on a lot of people's minds is, how do I support my BDR team? How do I maximize efficiency? How do we smash our revenue goal? Because that's what we're all here to do. So we're going to be covering a range of topics and give you some tools that most of all will help you get the most out of the most important people in the organization, which are the BDRs. They are the lifeblood of the business. Let's not make that mistake. All right, so this week it's quite topical because it's BDR Appreciation Week. So I love it how we're doing this week. Let's kick it off there. Emily, I'm going to start with you. Like, efficiency for me can often be found through the right motivation, and that often ties into recognition. How do you ensure your team is recognized?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Recognition is really important for teams. I think you get a lot of BDR teams who are feeling maybe a little bit undervalued, not necessarily by their BDR leader, but maybe more by wider commercial teams or wider teams in the business. And I think a really good revenue leader would be someone who would find a way to make sure that that BDR team is feeling really valued and really recognized within the business. So that might be maybe from the sales team who they're working closely with, being grateful for the meetings that they receive, and not just the meetings that they receive, also the little things that SDRs do. That's really going to make a BDR feel valued. There's some quite basic ways that we can do this. We can make sure, first of all, that we're integrating our CRM or our sales engagement platform into something like Slack or a messaging tool. And that's going to help with shout outs when meetings get booked, or even as simple as when a deal closes, if it was SDR generated, thank the SDR. It sounds so basic, but sometimes those fundamentals are missed. Or it can go completely the other way and it can be a massive grand gesture too. And I can give an example of a grand gesture. Do you want an example?
Please do.
Okay, so a few years ago, 2017, around about, so quite a while ago now, we're obviously in a different environment. We're in the office 5 days a week. And I can tell this story and probably get emotional even just thinking about it still to this point, which we're not going to do because we're on a webinar, so no tears. But we had a BDM in the company, and it was the first deal that they had closed since joining the business. And it was an SDR generated business deal. And that SDR was also relatively new. So it was their first closed deal as well. The BD comes into the office, he's carrying a box, a cake box. And he went straight up to this BDR's desk with the cake, opened up the box. The cake says, "Our first deal." And everyone in the sales floor is coming over, we're all having slices of cake, everyone's celebrating, and they're congratulating both of them on this deal. And actually, it really just came across as a real joint effort. And I'll tell you now that BDR was on cloud nine for like weeks. And that's something that's, nobody told that BD to do that. They genuinely were grateful, and they showed that. And I think that's really important. And if we can encourage that kind of behavior as leaders, then it's going to organically create that recognition that we need.
I love that. Imagine if there was a cake for every deal that we closed together. That would be wonderful.
Would be nice. Yeah.
I'd probably look very different, but anyway, it'd be a good thing. And Eric, where do you stand on this? Recognizing BDRs particularly? What are the things that companies should probably be thinking about?
Yeah, I think that's number one, especially just because I think the way that, SaaS especially has segmented, the sales department and having, like the lead generation side and then the closing role aspect of it, right? Just to piggyback off like what Emily was saying is that it just becomes very thankless. Like when you're an SDR or BDR and you're setting a demo, it just kind of feels like it's like, hey, okay, like let the adults take it from here, right? And then you don't really hear much about it because you maybe get like a small, one time $50 or $80 or something to book the demo, and then you're not even a part of the deal going up forward. So I think, yeah, just more like empowering the BDR to feel like they contributed. And like Emily's story said, like they were congratulating both because it's a team effort. And I think really just empowering BDRs to go out and, do the things that they do best, and really enabling them to, if they want to go into a closing role, make sure that they're part of the discovery call and part of that process, so that not only can they feel like they helped out in the process, but they can learn as well, because that's something I think we forget, is that this is a transitioning role, right? It's an entry role, and we need to set them up for success. And I think that's failed a lot.
Of that. I'm going to tiptoe into that topic then. Should BDRs be on discovery calls with sales reps? Yes or no? You're both nodding your heads, saying yes. Why do you guys think that's important?
Oh, I think it starts from a customer journey perspective. If you're doing the right thing as an SDR on that call, you're driving value, you're building a relationship. It's weird if you're then not on the call. It seems disingenuous from my perspective. So I think when you're thinking about your clients or your prospects, that's the first thing. Can we provide a smooth handover? And for me, that actually looks like the SDR starting the call. Hey, it was great to speak to you last week about X, Y, Z. These are the problems you outlined. This is why I'm letting you connect with this person who's an expert in your industry or your vertical. And now let's go into that. But also, obviously, the learning aspect and the exposure that it gets for the SDR.
Yeah, nice. Eric, where do you sit on this one?
Yeah, I think, people buy from people, especially ones that they like, right? And if you get, outreach by a BDR and you really connect with them and you like what they're talking about, clearly you want to hear more from them. It never feels good to get passed off in that situation. I do think it should be their choice, though. I think we should just be giving more responsibility. And like I said, like treating them like adults, like, they are professionals. Say they're busy, because that is, I think, a reason why they don't want you to be on the call is they're, hey, just go out and set demos and we'll have our AEs do what they do best, is close. But if the BDR wants to be on the call or thinks it's going to be beneficial, like Emily said, it improves the buyer experience so much. And I never feel good about being passed off either. It just feels like, oh, I'm just being sold here, right? When it should be very conversational, and there should be, kind of a mutual respect there.
Yeah, and look, we're talking about maximizing BDR efficiency here today. Now, the argument I've had with probably a good dozen sales leaders in the past has been like, well, if they're on the disco demo, then they're not prospecting. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
It was always one that I struggled trying to justify. And then when I did it, I actually separated the team in two. And the ones that didn't show up, their show rate was so much lower. So putting all this time into prospecting, someone's raising their hand saying, yes, I'd like a disco demo. And then it's just sort of handing off. So they either didn't show, or the conversion rate and the movement through the funnel was a lot slower. And once I found that, that's what justified it. And we do it for every single one. We don't give the option. Every single meeting at Reach Desk will be with the BDR and the AE. And it's just a much better experience. And actually, I believe it helps efficiency. So it doesn't take away from, yes, it takes away from the time of prospecting, but actually the conversion rates, and I'm going to come on to this next, is that how do we measure BDRs? Now, there are different ways of doing it. You have point systems. You measure it on meeting booked. You can measure it on qualified opportunities. There are a combination of revenue. How do you guys? Emily, you've got a team of outbound sales reps. What are they measured on?
Yeah. So in terms of a comp perspective, I think obviously when we're talking about comp, we want to drive the right behaviors. Different comp models are going to work for different people. We've got people on here that won't have the same kind of teams that we've got. I think you've got to think about at what stage is the SDR team at? And is it a team that's in its infancy, or is it a very well-established team? The ultimate goal for me is let's get it to a point where we can comp on both sales accepted and then also on closed won. It's not always possible to be able to do that in a team that's very new and very early on their journey within a company. But if we can get the comp structure to be around the quality, not just the quantity, that's really important for me. But then there's other things that we can measure the team on, that they should measure themselves on, around the conversion rates and around the input metrics, what's going to drive success for them, and just learning a bit more about where they convert the highest, things that are going to help them know their route to target, basically.
Nice. Eric, anything to add to that?
Yeah. Man, Emily, you're a hard act to follow because you took the words right out of my mouth, But yeah, I think the idea is, what are you looking for? Are you looking for quality or looking for quantity? And I think sometimes companies want quantity, right? Maybe it's a very short sales cycle. It's a very transactional product or service. But, if you are looking for quality, I think that is the way to go as far as, put more emphasis on, qualified demos. And I think, not worrying about so much of the spray and pray metrics of like, did you make these amount of calls today? Is it more like, are you following up with people? Are you making sure you're checking in? Are you, doing more prospecting, deep research and personalization and that type of stuff, which sometimes it can be hard to measure. So I feel for you sales leaders, right? Like it is a kind of conundrum of, how do you actually measure some of these kind of intangible things that these sales reps do. But I do think just putting more emphasis on quality and really just like trusting them, right? Like if you have the feeling that they're doing their job and they're doing a good job, just giving them more freedom and, maybe a little bit more wiggle room when things don't happen, because sales can be, very fluctuating. It can just be, cyclical. Sometimes you have a great month, sometimes you don't. And just empowering them of like, you're doing the right thing and checking in or making sure that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Keep making the deposits. Sorry, Emily, I cut you off there.
I was just going to say, I agree with almost everything you said. I just want to raise maybe a little red flag on when we have people who we are giving them that full autonomy and they are maybe not doing an equal blend of the amount of activity or activity. And there can be a bit of a risk around that quality and quantity thing, because what you can sometimes get is you can get a BDR who is really good at finding low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
This is not a bad thing. I'm not knocking it, because it's actually really good hunter instinct and it's a good thing to see in someone. But in the long term, that can come with some risks, because say, for example, you've got someone on your team who is really good at booking meetings, but via email. Okay, they're hitting their target. So we're kind of letting them have the leeway of doing it your own way because you're getting to your number. But actually, as a leader, we're doing them a bit of a disservice if we don't raise that as okay, you're only focusing on one channel. You end up with a rep who's not made enough calls or not had enough connected calls to actually build up the skill of controlling a conversation or leading a discovery, or all of these things. Or the other way around, let's say they're only smashing the phones, and they never do any social selling, or they never do any emailing, then they can't write copy. And be like,
and then there's like favoritism going on, right? Or there's assumed favoritism if one person's not making their calls or sending their emails, right? So like, how do we combat that? Do we have just lower daily metrics, or is that just part of the job? Like, is that just something people need to suck up? And because I'm pretty infamous for complaining about metrics.
I think honestly, it's about, as leaders, about us thinking about how are we going to get this person to be well-rounded and have skills in all of the different areas. And if somebody makes 0 calls, but they're hitting their numbers, they're not going to have the skill that they need if they want to progress in their future career, to be honest, into any role, really. You and I now, we're not in sales, we're not AEs, but we're on a call, we're having to have a conversation. So
but maybe that's the problem with like the one size fits all though model, right? Like, it's not like we have to have leaderboards and stuff. Like, maybe we, being transparent about who is setting demos or who's closing deals, but do we need everyone to know how many calls you're making, how many emails you're sending out? Like, can't we like kind of, maybe that's a lot to ask from your guys' end, but like to personalize it, if someone's bad on the phone, why are they making 100 calls a day? If they're a really good copywriter and they're really good at speaking with people, but it's just on a cold call, they're not, like maybe just trying to connect with them on LinkedIn, etc., putting more emphasis on those roles. Like, is that possible? I know this is like an impossible task for a sales leader. So
yeah, I love the healthy debate here, and it's good to have a bit of contention. Yeah, so thank you for flagging it. But like we
were agreeing too much.
I think we were agreeing a bit too much. But this brings on 2 quite big topics, and we've mentioned personalization and taking a multi-channel approach. And I'd like to start with personalization, because I think that's going to help move this forward in terms of where we get to here. Not that we're trying to get a conclusion or agree necessarily, but I think this is a good debate to have. Personalization has been the talk of the town for so long. Right now, I used to sell into the world of e-commerce, and personalization was just this buzzword that everyone got bored of, because every retailer, every store that was trying to do omni-channel marketing, personalization was everything. But no, people didn't really understand what it meant. And now it's seeping into the B2B world more than anything, because we're talking about personalization at scale. Eric, I'm going to start with you. What's personalization mean to you?
So I think a lot of times people misunderstand the purpose behind personalization. So a lot of times when I was in a sales role, I would get told, go look at their Facebook or their LinkedIn or et cetera, find the school that they went to and maybe send them a mug from their alma mater or something like that, which is cool, right? But it doesn't take a lot of effort. And I'm not gaining anything from you saying like, oh, you went to ASU, or like, oh, that's cool that you went to Stanford. I think the idea is to make a personal connection. And people just love to talk about themselves, right? Like, that's why I started a podcast. I knew that I would be able to reach out to sales leaders and people that I wanted to learn from, just by saying, hey, come talk about yourself, and like, we both gained a lot of value out of it. They got free content, etc. But my point is that go and figure out what they're about. Right. And the easiest way to do this is go onto LinkedIn and see if they've made any posts recently, because then you can kind of get an idea. What are they passionate about? What do they like to talk about? What are their pains? Right. Like, because that plays very, very well on LinkedIn. So just try to get inside the mind of like who they are and what they care about. So go into their post. If they have a podcast or they do anything like that, if they're an artist or anything that, you could tell that they're putting a lot of time and effort into, go and bring that up. I've had I get a lot of sales outreach, but one time someone just said, hey, really love your podcast. Really enjoying your content. Some people say that. So I asked him, oh yeah, really? Like, what was your favorite episode? And he said, oh, selling with purpose with Ian Koniak. And I was like, you probably could have just went on my page and picked a random episode, but that was the correct answer. So, like I'll take your demo.
Nice. But so with that, you mentioned some people misunderstand what personalization means. Why did it take that person having to research your podcast and like needing to know something about you for you to take the meeting? What do you think is driving that human behavior to happen?
Well, just you get so many sales pitches a day, unless it's just like, oh yeah, I've already been looking into this product, or this is actually a solution that I need today. It's just about opening up the conversation, because typically if have a product that is at least doing some marketing, and it's a pretty small world here in SaaS, like people are going to know about the tools that are out there and available. If it's something that I need, I've probably gone and done some research. Not a lot of times have people come to me and, try to solve a pain that I didn't know even existed. Like if you can do that, kudos to you, but oftentimes it's not going to happen. So it's more about just, hey, give me a few times to impress you and change your mind, essentially. And it's just all about like, do you even fall through the cracks? And the personalization aspect is going to make it stand out to me, and I'm going to remember it, because you might even have a great pitch and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I actually do want to take that demo, but I'm really busy right now. And then they don't follow up, or et cetera happens. But if someone personalizes it, that's going to be memorable. And when they reach out again, I'm going to feel like, oh, I need to respond to that person. There's going to be an urgency behind it.
Nice. So it's about starting the conversation, but it's also about being memorable. Emily, you've got a fairly large team. How do you teach your team how to personalize?
I think probably the best way to think about it is not to try and personalize the same for every single person. There's lots of people who are talking about like, we've got to get scalability, we've got to get repeatability, but actually you can run into a trap with personalization where you end up spending hours curating a message that isn't any better than what you could have done in 5 minutes. So for me, it's actually about taking it back and not trying to personalize for every single person, but actually thinking about, okay, how can I look at my accounts and look at my contacts and decide who is the right person to spend longer on personalizing than other people. You might have a specific top tier account where you've got your best quality persona. Yeah, let's spend some time on that person. But in one of my less relevant accounts, let's say, or one that's further away from our ICP, with a persona that's not necessarily one that we always convert, then I wouldn't be spending hours and hours trying to personalize that message. But also personalization, it can come in different levels. So it can be about the person. If you can't find information about that person, you're also personalizing if you're talking about their company, or if you're talking about their industry or the market in general. Just something that's going to be relevant that makes them think this message was thoughtful, not just a message that other people have received also. That's how I would be thinking about it. What I don't like is, oh, hey, I'm reaching out to you because you're the marketing director. That's not personalization. People might think it is, but that's not personalization. Anybody could write that, and actually a system could do that for you, automated. So that's my number one check, is could this be done by an automated system? If yes, it's not personalization. If no, you're on the right lines.
Right. So what you're doing is you're saying you kind of have an account tiering system, but then you have a by persona as well, and that gives your reps the framework they need to know how much time they should be spending. Love it. Nice. Yeah. When we look, what we use is the 3x3, which is company, contact, or compelling event. For me, sometimes personalization can be really as simple as timing. One of the things that, particularly in the middle of the summer, that happens is people are out of office, and you can get their out of office email, and you can actually personalize just based on that one trigger. So usually say I'm back in the office on Monday, the 22nd of August, for example. And what we do a lot, and we see this is very successful, and of course I'm biased because we're a gifting platform, is we send them like a holiday blues gift. So we say, I noticed you mentioned you were on vacation, and you come back from vacation. You're probably staring through hundreds and hundreds of emails. Here's like Deliveroo or Uber Eats to get you through the day. And you probably got nothing in the fridge as well. So that's it. And you don't ask for anything in return. And that's just one simple example of personalizing at scale without having to do too much, but actually just based on timing too.
Yeah.
Um,
People have got that out of office email and not done anything with it. You're standing out.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay, so like you've got the personalization piece done. Then we have an array of channels. We've got everything from the phone, email, LinkedIn, direct mail and gifting. There's video, there's WhatsApp, there's text message, there's multiple channels. So multi-channel is becoming hard to manage, but the businesses that are actually accomplishing it are the ones, in my opinion, the ones that are getting the best results. Now, Eric, obviously, that given your background and what you guys do above ground, this is like your bread and butter. What is like? We're talking about BDRs here today. What are the key channels that you think BDRs should be latching onto, and like, what does multi-channel really mean to you?
Yeah, so I think that email and cold calling is always going to be a foundation of sales. It's more so how you're approaching each channel, right? So if you're cold calling, I like to take the approach of maybe send them an email first or connect with them on LinkedIn first, so that it's a little bit more of a warm call. So even if I didn't get the email or I didn't get the LinkedIn connection request, it kind of gives me an open to be like, hey, I tried to contact you on these channels first and didn't reach you. So, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm calling you out of the blue, but I tried to get a hold of you on these other channels. So I'm making my best effort here, right? And if you do get a response like, hey, check back in with me, then you can cold call. But I think, LinkedIn is a great channel. And I think just the medium that you use as well on those channels. So like video, I think is, just it like, again, talking about how adding time to what BDRs are doing, I understand that. But again, to piggyback off what Emily was saying, target specific accounts, like, make a list. If you have Salesforce, run a report on your top accounts and your most, high fit score accounts, and, personalize through that through LinkedIn, send them a video message. It opens up the conversation and makes you more human. So I think, social is a great aspect. If you can, hit them up on WhatsApp or any channels like that. Like Alex said, there was a meme going around for a little while about like FaceTime cold calling. And I love that idea. I don't know why, but it's like the cold calling of video. If I can see the person, and that just adds a human element to me. And if someone was FaceTiming me, I'd probably pick up, and I don't even know if I'd be that mad if I could see the person. And so maybe we can make that, a thing.
FaceTime cold calling. That is
Yeah.
bold. Emily, would you encourage your reps to do that?
Well, I really think that depends what industry you're selling into. Honestly, I think that would work so well, sales to sales, maybe sales to marketing. I would argue that might not work so well when you're calling supply chain directors. But
no.
You never know.
Yeah, no.
You never know. Well, look, we sell to sales and marketers. I actually tried this about 3 weeks ago, by the way, myself. We had a rep who had handed over a couple of their accounts, and I actually grabbed one of them and I had to re-prospect into the account myself. And I haven't done actual sales probably in about 2 years myself. And I tried this because I saw a blog about it, and it was all around like how we should be using video calling. And I tried emailing, I tried LinkedIn, I tried a simple text message, and then I tried the FaceTime video, and they picked up straight away. But they were actually quite shocked. They were like,
yeah.
Wow, I did. And the first thing they said is, I didn't think you'd look like that. And I was like, which I didn't even know how to respond, but it worked. And I had a 15-minute conversation with them, and I'm still talking to them now. But it was an experience, but I think it could be something that could work. I think it might have legs, but I totally agree. It depends on who you sell into. We sell to salespeople and marketers, and they're usually quite grateful when we try new tactics, because they always say, well, maybe we should be doing this for our team. But if you're selling to like CIO, CTO, supply chain, maybe something like that, those personas may not appreciate it as much. But let's see. If anyone does test it, please let us know how it goes, and maybe it'll become the new thing.
I would love to hear about it. That's an awesome story.
Nice. Okay. Well, look, I think we've got another 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. Look, we've spoken about personalization. We've spoken about like how you keep BDRs motivated, how multi-channel can come into this. Now, there's a hidden ingredient to being successful and being able to maximize what you do as a BDR. I don't think it gets talked about enough. And it's actually, for me, it's all around mindset. Right? I believe mindset is actually the secret to success. And I'm going to start with you, actually. How do you ensure your team has the right mindset so that they can be successful? Because in my opinion, if you can do that, you're going to maximize their efficiency for good.
Which one of us were you speaking to?
Emily.
Oh, right. All right. Yes. Mindset's hugely important, because this is, and people will say it, they'll say it over and over again, this could be and probably is one of the most difficult jobs there is to do. And if you don't have the right mindset, then you're going to struggle to plow through it, basically. But I think even just the whole perception of cold calling in itself, and we've just had a conversation about whether it's okay or not to FaceTime somebody. There's this perception out there that we're pestering people when we're cold calling them. And I see a lot of SDRs feeling almost guilty about making a cold call because it's that person hasn't chosen to have that conversation with them. And one of the things I'm trying to do to help with mindset is I'm always saying, you're not actually interrupting their day. If you are cold calling them, it doesn't mean you're a burden. And I think as a leader, if we can get our SDRs to seriously believe in what they're selling, then actually they are going to be coming at the cold call with the mindset of, I'm about to do my prospect a favor if they pick up the phone, because I'm about to introduce them to something that is so valuable that actually it's going to take away a pain that they're experiencing, or it's going to take away multiple pains that they're experiencing. And there's many things about mindset, but that's one small thing that maybe is a bit more practical. If we can change that initial mindset about the cold call in itself, then your team's going to go from, oh, I have to pick up the phone because it's part of my job and my boss told me to, oh yes, I get to pick up the phone today and I get to speak to this person at this company and I'm going to help them. And I hopefully will make their day better because they can see the light at the end of a tunnel with a problem that they've got, or they can see a future in their working day where they don't have to deal with this challenge. And then you're doing a much nicer job, really, aren't you? You're going to work thinking, how can I help someone? How can I make someone's life better? And lucky them if they answer the phone.
Absolutely love that. That is golden. So you're actually teaching your team to embrace the phone and to almost look forward to doing it and really remove it's not a stigma, but there has been a mindset where it's impossible. People don't pick up. They've all got cell phones or the number might be wrong. You're getting your team to embrace it.
And
I think that's golden.
People embrace it really well. And some people, it takes time to embrace it. So it's not like one, you can't just tell someone, oh, by the way, it's a favor if they answer and then they believe it. And then suddenly they're smashing the phones. It's a journey. But that's
it's damaging, I just don't think humans deal with rejection well, right? And when 90%, 95, 99% of the time you're hearing people yell at you and scream at you and hang up on you, like it's a lot and it's taxing. And I think something that we can do is be more sympathetic to that. Like I agree with you that when I had that mindset shift in my own business, because I'm running the whole sales cycle with my clients and my prospects. As soon as I started taking more of like a consultative approach where, I'm turning down people. And that was some good advice that I received early on, is like, when when to say no and why you're saying no, like that's a big movement forward, where I think a lot of salespeople can do that. Know that you are trying to help them out. And by telling them, hey, maybe this isn't a fit for you, sometimes makes people want it more. It's like you want what you can't have. And if you go into an approach of like, hey, tell me about your business and genuinely ask them about what they're doing so that you can understand, maybe halfway through it, you just say, hey, actually, maybe this isn't a fit. It seems like you guys really need this or that. They're going to remember that and they're going to really appreciate that. And maybe they'll ask more questions and, like, well, why am I not a fit? But yeah. And to go back to, what we can do, I think we also just need to be more sympathetic to mental health as well. And I'm a big mental health advocate. And, I'm not even a very shy person. Like I consider myself shy, but do a lot of public stuff. And it took me a long time to get comfortable doing this type of stuff, podcast, public speaking. I put a lot of work into it. So I think sometimes, like Emily was saying, you just have to do it. And I don't think we're doing any favors by making people feel bad or, like, hey, just push through it. I think we just have to come from an approach of like, hey, I know this sucks sometimes, but you have to have that mindset shift. And if maybe they're having a bad day, maybe just give them the afternoon off, or, hey, like, let's go back at this tomorrow morning. We're going to get like pumped up before the calls, and, we're going to do a couple calls together and make it feel like a team process. And I think that's really helpful, because a lot of times you just see the people that are doing well, they're getting pat on the back, and then you feel like, oh, something's wrong with me. Why can't I be like these other people? And everyone's just different. Everyone's going through different stuff and it handles it differently.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. I think that the mental health aspect is something that particularly I was thinking 2 years ago, we went from being all in an office together where we were rallying around each other. So I had like, a team of 10 SDRs, and you were hearing people making dials. And then next thing you know, you're in your bedroom on your own making dials. That is hard. That was a tough gig. One of the things that I learned from a lot of what we've learned over the past 2 years is that we've been teaching reps a lot on how to role play the right things. When you teach people how to role play, you generally tell them, like, open up a call and this is how you can do it, and then you're going to respond and it's going to move forward. And then what we don't do is we don't role play rejection. We don't role play how you prepare people for that. We don't throw people in the deep end early and like rip off the band-aid. So what we do is day 3, you're on the phones. You don't know what you're talking about, but we have a dead list. So the dead list is a lot of closed lost accounts. So it doesn't matter if that doesn't go the right way, but they're embracing the phone early on. But also when you role play, it's not just the, hey, how are you doing? Yeah, fine, thanks. Sorry, who's calling? The traditional role play, you role play rejection, and you actually get people prepared for that. And then they're actually ready, and it has a longer lasting effect.
That's a really good idea. I mean, I try and push the team in role plays to be realistic and not be too nice, because people are so nice when they're playing the prospect.
Yeah, way too nice.
But probably not taking it as far as you have, Alex, but probably will be going forward, because it's something you need to get used to.
Yeah, I did it with a couple of our team in New York when I was there about a month ago, and I sat them down and they said, "Hi, role playing a cold call," and they said, "Hi, is that Alex? Have you got 2 minutes to have a chat? This is a sales call." I said, "No, I haven't slept at all. I've got 100 emails to get to, and my toddler's throwing milk at the dog, so I don't have time." And they were like, "Oh God!" And I was like, "That's my life sometimes, by the way. That's the reality." But be prepared for that, because if you do it in the right way, as you say, Eric, like, okay, well, hey, tell you what, actually, sounds like I've actually caught you a bad time. Can I call you tomorrow?
Yeah.
Then people will either do 1 or 2 things. Well, it's probably 3. No, don't ever call me again. 2, actually, yeah, I'm free tomorrow morning. Or how about we chat right now? And you can actually reverse the entire conversation, because you get people prepared for rejection early on, and you give them a mini playbook around that.
Yeah, I think direct mail is like great for that as well. When I would do that, I would say, hey, you know what? No problem. Let me send you, a gift card, or I would send them a gift or something based on that situation. Even if they were mad at me, like, hey, I'm a human, you're a human. I know I caught you at a bad time. Here, take lunch on me. And not even really expecting anything out of it, but just knowing that would be memorable. Sometimes, and as a salesperson, you got to invest sometimes in that. If, say you don't have a direct mail platform, it's still not a lot to send a gift card, right? You buy one, send them, the account of it. So yeah, I love that approach.
Nice. Cool. So we've got a couple more minutes. I'm going to just ask everyone listening in to submit any questions they've got. Now, we've spoken about multiple channels, but I would like to dial into one, because I think it's one that, from what I heard, less than 1% of people who are on LinkedIn are actually active on LinkedIn, which means 99% of people who are on LinkedIn actually don't use it actively. Wow. Isn't that mad? So there's a huge opportunity. And if we do it right, I think there's a way that we can really help BDRs maximize their efficiency. How do you guys think, and Eric, I'll throw it to you first. How do you think BDRs, SDRs should be using LinkedIn effectively now? You mentioned researching earlier, but how about something more actionable? How can you actually get the most out of LinkedIn or other channels perhaps to actually break through the noise and start a conversation?
Yeah, I think, people are probably sick of hearing this, but I think that yeah, you need to start building a brand and creating content, even if it's just something small to start out. If you're not comfortable with creating content, go follow some people on LinkedIn that are, sales influencers or thought leaders, and kind of study what they're doing. But the main goal of it is just to get your message out and start cementing yourself as a professional, someone that has a seat at this table that can help, right? So you can start off by talking about your journey, what's your background, so that people know you, because that's another factor of it that people forget, is that me as a prospect, that's the first thing I do. I go check out your LinkedIn. And if you don't have your LinkedIn updated, get a good picture, optimize your homepage, and then just start creating content. And like I mentioned earlier, I started a podcast, and I know this is like a lot of time and a lot of money to invest, but the reason why I did it, like I explained, was to start conversations, and no one has to hear it. And, it doesn't matter what happens out of it. It's more about just having those assets to be used later on down the road. So, you can just ask people to hop on a call. Hey, I'm thinking about creating some content. It doesn't have to be official podcast, but you can reach out to some people you want to learn from that probably charge a lot of money for private coaching. And if you just show them like, hey, I'm interested, I'm trying to network, I'm trying to further my career, people really rally behind that. And I think people miss out on that. They're too focused on the vanity metrics of it. But if you're consistent, you just put your story out there, you share your views and opinions, even if you don't feel like you've earned that yet, don't worry about it. Just tell your story, get out there, and really focus on building your brand, because that goes past any role or any job that you'll ever have.
Yeah. And what I hear a lot of is, well, why should I be building a brand because I'm just an SDR? Why would a CIO, CMO, a C-suite person listen to me? Where do you sit on this one, Emily?
I feel like that's not thinking about your whole life and your career and your
you're not always going to be that role, it's
like, I'm trying to think of an off the cuff analogy of this. Like, it's going to be absolutely rubbish because I'm thinking of it off the top of my head, but like, you don't see Usain Bolt just starting to run like 2 weeks before the Olympics, do you? Like, start from scratch. But it can sound really overwhelming to somebody. So, oh, suddenly I've got to become a thought leader overnight. I'm only just getting my head around what this SDR job even is, what this industry even is. How do I suddenly come up with content, come up with things to talk about, and sound like I know what I'm saying when somebody who's in a C-suite level, who's got all of this experience, is going to be reading it. And that can be overwhelming. So we need to do something to help people not feel like it's all on them. Because, for example, we're on a webinar right now, and lots of companies with SDRs will host webinars. If we can get an SDR onto a webinar to listen and to write notes, and then to share those notes with people in the team. And when I say write notes, I honestly mean every single thing that they can type in the amount of time that they're on that call. And then typically webinars have a number of different themes. So even this one, we've spoken about a number of different topics, and there's different things we could talk about there. It's not their idea, but they've got the notes from the webinar that then could maybe be repurposed into a post on LinkedIn or an article on LinkedIn. And that's a really easy way for somebody who's maybe new to the business or new to posting things on LinkedIn to put something out there where they're not necessarily nervous about, is this message going to resonate? Yes, they know it's going to resonate because they didn't necessarily even say it. It was said on a webinar with loads of attendees and it got great traction. Hey, last week we caught up with Eric and Emily, and this topic was covered and I learned this from it. That's good enough. That's you starting to share things out with the world. And it's not as overwhelming as, oh, I've got to come up with this massive idea out of nowhere. What am I going to post?
Yeah, I love it. Just share what's real and what's out there in the real world. Love it. We've got a question from Leah here. Any more tips for finding the balance between keeping BDRs accountable, but also providing autonomy and not micromanaging? So I think what Leah's saying here is that we want to be able to give them the autonomy. We also want to make sure we're not micromanaging them. How do you strike that balance? Firstly, is it important? I think we're both saying, we're all saying, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to throw this over to you first. Like, how do you strike that balance? How do you make sure you're not breathing down their neck all the time, but also not just abdicating and leaving them to their own devices?
Yeah, it can be really hard, because sometimes you do have to be the person that does breathe down their neck a little bit. But I would say that when you're having to be that person, that's because what the person is missing is they're missing the understanding of what it takes to be successful. And it's our job to educate them in that. What do I need to do in this BDR role to actually hit my targets, or to generate a great personal brand internally, or anything that it could be? And I would say that the step one of accountability is having them understand what they need to do and why they need to do it. And that could be as simple as, I actually need to know why this number of activities filters down to make me hit my target. And it's not always the same for every person, like we spoke about earlier. But as a leader, you can maybe show people, and I literally did this session with my team a week ago, and we do it regularly. I've looked at all the data from half of a year, and I've looked at all of the top performers, and this many activities on average created this many meetings. And it's different for each person. You might get somebody who has a 60% sit rate on meetings, and someone else who has a 100% sit rate on meetings. Now, the one person who's got a 60% sit rate, they're going to need to make more meetings if they want to hit the same target as the other person. So it does two things on the accountability side. And it sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm actually not. Number one, it helps them to be accountable for their own development, because they identify areas that they need to improve, like the sit rate and driving urgency and trying to deliver enough value to make someone show up. And then it also makes them understand why they're holding themselves accountable to the numbers or to the input that they need to give. So it's about the education. And if they really understand why, then you probably won't need to crack the whip anymore, because they get it. And then if they really, really get it, and you still feel like you're having to crack the whip, then you've got a will problem. And then maybe it's a different conversation that you're having with them.
Nice. So what you're doing is you're almost putting a mirror up and saying, here's and reverse engineering. How do you get there? And if you're massively off track, that's when you jump in and say, I need to really help you micromanage it.
Yeah. And also, if they can present it back to you, that's really good as well, because then you can test that they've understood what they've learned. So we'll do something like called a route to target, and where they'll come to the session and they'll say, look, this is what these are my accounts, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to put into it, this is what I'm holding myself accountable for, these are 3 goals of the month or the quarter, and this is what I'm going to go and do. And it gives you the chance for them, they've said it then, and there's something psychological about saying it and presenting it to then hold themselves accountable to it. But also you can test whether actually they've got all of the maths right and they really know what it takes to go into it.
Nice, nicely done. Okay, and finally from you, Eric, before we close things off, how do you help this? How do you help keep the balance here?
Yeah, I think it's all about how you approach like coaching and managing. And I think sometimes people just get put into a management role just because they were good at sales. And that doesn't mean that they're good at, pushing people and getting the best out of them. If you look at, so when I was studying martial arts and stuff like that, the friend who was teaching me would do compliment sandwich, right? Like, because it's hard to hear feedback and what you're doing wrong. So what he would do is he'd say, hey, I really like how you're doing this. And I was bad at all of it, but he would show me something that he really liked that I did. Then he'd criticize me, say, hey, you need to work on this, and this is how we're going to work on it. But I love your attitude. I love like how you're putting in the reps and stuff like that. And I think sometimes we don't do enough of that. I love that you're talking about how, you kind of have these exercises and games. Like sales can be very gamified, like make it fun and, make the tough feedback part of like, hey, this is why we're training, so that when you go out there, this is so easy. That's why professional athletes, that's why they're training all the time, so that during the game, they're like, oh yeah, I ran for 4 hours earlier. Like I can do this in short sprints. So that you're just ready and limber and, just knowing how far to push people. And I think sometimes when you're doing well, you don't get pushed enough. you know, people will just let off like, hey, you have it all figured out. I think sometimes that's the best time to really push people and try to get the most out of them, is when they're feeling confident. Like, hey, how far can we actually push this? And sometimes when people are really down, that's when they get pushed the most. But sometimes maybe that's the time you need to, hey, all right, well, let's just relax and, you know, let's work on these things. And, you know, things will get better tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day, etc.
Love it. We've actually got some more questions, so I'm going to answer one of them, and then we're going to break after that, if that's all right. Just very quickly, Andrea has asked, what's the best way to interview someone for their first BDR role? What do you look for or ask? Make sure they have. Just simply because we don't have time, I'll answer this one. I've always tested for 5 things. We've probably done 500 BDR interviews in the past couple of years. Haven't changed it since the beginning. Test for coachability, curiosity, prior success, work ethic, and intelligence. Test those for those 5 things. Have a scorecard. Make sure that it's fair. I've actually hired some of the best BDRs in the world who have never been a BDR or been in sales before, who haven't even gone to university or college, who have proven those 5 things work. And they've been successful. The problem I have when a lot of companies are interviewing for their first BDRs is they try and get all these athletes from certain colleges or schools who are going to be primed and ready. And actually, I prefer diversity. I prefer removing the blockers there and just testing on scorecards. So, Andrea, if you want that scorecard, hit me up and I'll send it to you. But otherwise, I'm going to have to break it there. That was a very, very quick fire answer. Eric, Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been awesome. I feel like we could talk for days.
Yeah.
But sadly, we don't have days. We have to go out and build pipeline and make sure that it comes across the table. So I'll be sending something to both of you from Reach Desk, of course, to thank you for your time and for joining us today. But it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for everyone watching either the live session or the recording. This has been another Reach Desk webinar, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys.